After playing and finishing the excellent mouthwashing 3 times in a row, which I highly recommend by the way, the itch of visiting some more of these retro-style PS1 era horror games was still not quite scratched. While looking for additional games to play during spooky season and beyond, I stumbled upon Crow Country, which is a survival horror game created and published by indie studio SFB Games, released on PC and console, that seeks to bring the general aesthetics and panic-inducing gameplay of genre classics such as Resident Evil and Silent Hill to the table. In this video, I will share my thoughts about the game and also explain why I think Crow Country is a great entry point into the genre as a whole. As always, I will try to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible, only this time I'm leaving the story segment completely out, because I feel like there's not much to talk about without spoiling some major revelations that occur throughout, or rather towards the end of Crow Country. I feel like the story has to be experienced firsthand, going in completely blind for the most effect. With that said though, I will show gameplay sections of the later stages of the game, as well as all the bonus items and costumes you get by completing it fully, but all this stuff doesn't reveal anything important to the story. Nevertheless, be advised and let's jump in. Now, the game takes place in Crow Country, which is not only the game's title obviously, but also the name of the abandoned amusement park and its surrounding area in which you'll find yourself in. The year is 1990 and you play as Special Agent Mara Forrest, a tough individual with awesome purple hair who wants to investigate not only the sudden closure of the park but also the disappearance of its director, Edward Crow, with both of these events transpiring 2 years prior. Upon your arrival, it is quite clear that something sinister is going on here, with rundown buildings and attractions, as well as grotesquely mutated people and monsters showing up all over the place, and now it falls to you to unravel all of the park's mysteries and get to know yourself all over again in the process. The game's description asks, "Who are you really, Mara Forrest?" implying that Mara's background itself seems to be an important piece in solving this puzzle. Let's go over all the technical aspects and sound design first before getting into the general gameplay side of things. Although it was made in Unity, Crow Country runs flawlessly, as you might expect by looking at the graphical fidelity here. If you're new on my channel, I always mention that Unity titles tend to run a bit choppy on my machine sometimes, but no issues here, thankfully. I couldn't test the console performance sadly, but I'd imagine it runs great and stable there as well. The graphics, or art style I should say, is very much reminiscent of the look of the original Final Fantasy VII I think, and I'm particularly fond of the character and enemy designs. I love that they all kinda look like action figures. Makes you wanna grab through the screen, pull them out and play with them, respectfully of course. The ultra grainy lo-fi filter that sits on top of it all can get pretty intense at times, occasionally obscuring items and consumables, or making them just a lot harder to spot in the scenery, but I get what SFB were trying to do here, and I mean it's a horror game after all. Keep in mind though that you can't turn it off at all, that filter is very much baked into Crow Country's visual style. Audio-wise, it's got a very atmospheric soundscape with hard-hitting, crunchy sound effects that emulate the games from the era it's referencing perfectly, I feel. Furthermore, the musical score created by Okoroid is full of beautifully haunting ambient pieces that oftentimes reminded me of the work of Akira Yamaoka a bit, with its own unique character that just oozes a lot of atmosphere and couldn't be more fitting for a game like this. It's excellent, simply put. Just listen to Haunted Hilltop or Bloody Escapade and tell me you didn't get spooked. The soundscape combined with the visuals ultimately create a very creepy amalgamation that ensures goosebumps and upstanding neck hair. At least that's what happened to me during my first playthrough. Now let's quickly check out the difficulty and accessibility options before finally moving on to the gameplay section of this review. Crow Country offers 3 difficulty settings for you to choose from. There's Explorer, which is the game's story mode, so to speak. There aren't any enemies to encounter here, just the puzzles. Then there's Survivor, which is the balanced or normal setting. And finally Murder of Crows, which is the hard mode, in which there's more enemies to fight and they will deal significantly more damage to you on top of that. I didn't touch Explorer at all. I played through Murder of Crows first and did an additional achievement cleanup on Survivor right after. Beating the game on either normal or hard will earn you a rank, determined by how many heals and extra lives you've used, and how many secrets you found during your playthrough. Depending on which rank you got at the end, the game will award you with a handful of pretty cool bonus items like special outfits or weapons you can use in subsequent runs, encouraging you to beat Crow Country multiple times. Beating the game once will also unlock the Crow Quest mode that lets you hunt down 42 well-hidden crystal crows that are strewn all over the park. Destroying all of them will also net you a bonus skin and pistol cosmetic to show off. I have to note that finishing it on Explorer won't rank you at all, so you won't get any of the stuff by playing on this difficulty, except getting access to the Crow Quest mode. I think this unlocks either way. But yeah, choosing the difficulty is basically how much you can customize your experience with Crow Country. There are no additional accessibility options to be messed with as of now. Of course, you can rebind your controls should you so desire, and it even has native DualSense support, which made me really happy because that's not always a given on PC. So, with Crow Country being basically a huge love letter to action horror games of the past, it not only looks and sounds but plays like one as well, only with a more modernized touch and minus the tank controls. In order to find out what's going on in this accursed theme park, you have to explore every nook and cranny of it, collecting key items and various consumables to stay alive, solving numerous puzzles, and fighting horrifying creatures and mini-bosses throughout the game. As you maneuver through Crow Country's darkest attractions, dodging monsters and traps alike, you'll come across other characters and notes that reveal a bit more about the park's past and the events that ultimately led to its closure and sudden disappearance of its director, Edward Crow. The bits and pieces you find here only draw you in further into the mystery, and I found that pretty engaging. Speaking of the NPCs you'll meet here, I personally thought they were all very sympathetic, with the exception of one or two, with well-written dialogues that make them seem believable and lively, and I quite liked the exchange and interaction between them and the protagonist Mara. Level design, I think, is very cool as well. The park offers some unique and diverse sets for you to check out. There's the mystical fairy pond and ocean world, the spooky area, which features a hedge maze, a crypt, and a haunted mansion, among other things, a whole underground section, and even an arcade with a bunch of different minigames to play, just to name a few examples here. Now, combat, while pretty much mostly optional, revolves around shooting enemies with your gun, and it's as jittery and imprecise as you might expect from a game like this. I mean, it's fully intentional. There's a whole lot of weapon sway when you draw your firearm, making landing headshots kind of tricky, and you might want to go for the heads in this one to deal more damage, but there are laser sights to find for your weapons to make it significantly easier. Thankfully, you find the laser sight for the starting pistol very early on, and there's one for the shotgun and magnum as well. Besides those weapons, there's also a flamethrower and grenades to find, and you'll unlock more by beating Crow Country with a high enough rank, as I mentioned earlier, like the crowbar, which is the only melee option you can get, and the rather overpowered Crow launcher. Additionally, you can unlock a crossbow and even a very cool laser gun cosmetic for your pistol, the latter by completing the optional Crow Quest mode, by the way, and all of those bonus weapons come with unlimited ammo as well. These are just fun unlockables for you to mess around with. There's also these little mushroom guys to be found who will enhance your weapon's firepower. They count towards finding the game's secrets and are well hidden as a result. Now, enemy variety is pretty solid here, I'd say. There's a bunch of different creatures to check out, but I gotta be honest, they all feel kinda samey, at least from a pure gameplay perspective. They all kinda just stumble towards you and want to give you a peck on the cheek, you know? Besides exploring the park and dropping the occasional creature, there's a whole lot of puzzles to solve in order for you to progress, as I teased at the beginning of this segment. Most, if not all of them, are rather typical for the genre, I'd say, in that you often have to collect a certain key item, which you then have to combine with a static set piece found in the scenery, like putting a mask into a door frame, that kind of stuff. Of course, there are several keypads and environmental riddles for you to crack as well. What I really liked about the puzzles is that every single solution can be found within the game in the form of these numerous notes scattered around, or codes written on the walls. It's all about carefully observing your surroundings, and all of the riddles were logical too, so no black monolith BS or anything like that in here. There's also the mechanic of consulting a fortune teller machine, which will give you a hint on where to go or what to do next. But using this will impact your endgame rank negatively, and you can't use them on the Murder of Crows difficulty at all. So how difficult and more importantly scary is Crow Country actually, and how long does it take to finish? Well, combat-wise it's definitely on the easier side, I'd say, even on the highest difficulty. The normal enemies as well as the mini-bosses you'll encounter die usually after a couple of well-placed shots, even more so if you've been on the lookout for weapons other than your pistol and their enhancements. Besides, there's ammo lying around basically everywhere. And that's totally fine in my opinion. I think this alone makes Crow Country a great beginner-friendly survival horror game. Not saying I didn't die at all, I definitely bit the bullet several times, especially towards the end when the game decides to throw all sorts of traps at you. There are fake consumables and ammo boxes, for instance, which explode upon picking them up, and they deal a substantial amount of damage. Now that's just sinister. But this too is an example of how you're supposed to be aware of your surroundings at all times. As far as scariness goes, I think Crow Country manages to be a very unsettling game in general. There are a few sudden shockers here and there, but the true horror comes from its dense, creepy atmosphere, mixed with the audio and mind games of what abominations could be lurking in the dark next. Of course, the horror aspect subsides with subsequent playthroughs, but the initial impression is very much horrifying in my opinion, and is what sticks with you anyway. Speaking of multiple playthroughs, I played through the game twice in order to reach 100% completion, and I think I spent close to 14 hours to achieve that. But if you don't care about that at all, then I'd say Crow Country can occupy you for 6 to 7 hours for one playthrough if you do some secret hunting on the side. It's a somewhat shorter game, but as mentioned, it encourages you to play through it multiple times if you want to unlock and check out every single bonus item. With that said, I think I pretty much covered every aspect about Crow Country, besides its story obviously. But yeah, if you're craving to play an old school survival horror game with unique twists, a great setting and solid action, this is a great one. Personally, I am a big fan of these PSX style indie games that seem to be getting some kind of revival these last few years, and Crow Country is no exception. I think it's a highly enjoyable game from start to finish, perfectly suitable for beginners and horror vets alike, and I for one am yearning for a sequel already. And that's gotta mean something, because I'm normally not that huge on horror games. Anyway, I will leave you to your thoughts for the time being. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I did making it, and I'll see you in the next one.